Hi, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Align's Daily Dose of Advice, our way of bringing you valuable insights and thought leadership from business coaches and experts from around the world on various topics that will hopefully help you and your business. My name is Eugene Turk. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Align. You can learn more about Align at aligntoday.com. And my guest today is Kelly Laverty. Kelly is a Campbell Fraser Coach of the Year and Focal Point Business Coaching Practice of the Year award winner. He has more than 30 years of business experience, and in the past decade alone has spent more than 10,000 coaching hours with CEOs, executives, and entrepreneurs. Kelly, it's a pleasure to have you on, and thanks so much for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you, Eugene. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a great opportunity to be able to give back to others. And what we're going to talk about this afternoon, hopefully, businesses in this environment can take this type of information and apply it to their organization, and just move forward and be successful. Stay positive.
Absolutely. So I think it's safe to say that most companies, many for the very first time, are dealing with large sections of their workforce working remotely. This obviously can bring its own sets of challenges. And so I wanted to ask you some advice for companies and their employees that are now experiencing this first time apart. So for business leaders and managers, what are some suggestions that you have for managing productivity of remote teams and making sure that the important work of the business is still getting done?
Okay. Great question. I think the important thing for managers to recognize is that we've all been suddenly immersed into this world of working remotely. It's normally in many situations, organizations might plan to have people start to work remotely, and we have that opportunity to be able to establish the right connections to servers and internet operability, access, and things like that. And we haven't had that opportunity to be able to do that. So what it also introduces is that for managers, that you can't manage or observe people working and what their work habits are.
Mhm.
We have to now start to move to a point where we need to get our mindset around managing around results.
Mhm.
We have to set, and in order to be able to do that, it's more important than ever to set expectations, to establish a culture of accountability,
Mhm.
and to be able to trust our employees that they're going to be able to get the work done. In addition to that, what we need to do is we need to continue to find ways to operate as a team. We're going to learn through this working at home environment or remote working how dependent we've now become on, or maybe we've always been dependent upon getting information from our colleagues, people that we work with, over the water cooler,
Yeah.
over coffee, being able to go down the hall and knock on their door to be able to get information. So we have to make sure that access to that information is still dealt with in an expedient way, and that there aren't delays in getting that information to allow us to do our job. The third or fourth thing that I would talk about is say that, look, you got to treat this as if you're going to the office. So get up at the same time, start your day at the same time. Have your break at the same time. Go home, so to speak, at the same time, and dress as if you were going to the office. The only thing that you got to recognize is that your commute to work is much shorter, right? So
Yeah.
you got to basically create that environment. The other thing that I would get managers to do is recognize that you got to encourage the employees to dedicate some space at home to work. It's very tough to work on your couch, so it may not be ideal, but essentially set up some dedicated workspace in order to be able to be effective and productive when you're in the office. And the last thing from a manager point of view, we'll talk about a little bit more this afternoon, is communicate, making sure that we never lose that element, that's how you're going to maximize productivity with your employees.
Um, More on the point about employees working from home. Obviously, many of us, like myself here in my backyard, are working from home and are also dealing with personal issues like homeschooling our children. So, what do the leaders of a business sort of need to realize and understand regarding the potential home distractions that many employees may also now be dealing with?
Right. Well, as I mentioned, when you have that opportunity to be able to plan to get an organization working remotely, or even some of the employees working remotely, we have that opportunity to lay out a certain plan. We need to be able to provide people with the right, we'll call it equipment or technology, making sure that they've got the right laptop. They make sure that we've got speakers and headphones and things like that, so we can communicate that way.
Mhm.
That they're in an environment where they've got stable internet capability, because we've become used to that the way it is. But in some environments, it's maybe not as stable as we would like it to be. The simple thing for managers that they have to realize is that we haven't had the luxury of planning for this. And so we need to recognize that we're going to have less than perfect environments in which people are working in.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
you may have to have a call with somebody and the dog is barking in the background. We may need, where maybe we haven't had an opportunity to provide daycare or arrange daycare for our kids. So we've got the 4-year-old who wants to be fed, and it's just the wrong time of the day, kind of thing, right? So managers, the simple thing, Eugene, is that managers have to recognize that it's not going to be the perfect environment, and we have to embrace that.
You mentioned sort of helping your employees get the right equipment, having a workspace at home. Just more along those lines, what are some other examples of things that employers can do to support and encourage their remote workers?
Well, I think there's 2 or 3 things that, and one of them I've already mentioned, is that it's the element of trust. Managers need to recognize that, and there's lots of people that, even from a management perspective, that aren't comfortable with people working from home, because they're the type of manager where they have to feel that they can see and what people are doing. They can manage by walking around, and therefore this trust element, they have to trust that people are going to do the job. And then in addition to that, the employees have to be able to trust the manager, that the manager is going to continue to communicate with them and support them as they go through this. So that's the one key element. The second element, which I talked about when I said communicate, 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 what some of my clients are doing right now is they are establishing regularly scheduled meetings. Meetings that might be like a regular staff meeting, or maybe even a check-in point or a touch point or a huddle, where we need to be able to communicate with each other. There's 3 imperatives in my mind that managers need to adhere to if they're going to be successful in supporting their employees like this. One is that these meetings should be regularly scheduled. Whether they're daily, weekly, or twice a week, you need to regularly or schedule them on your calendar so that everybody's got them.
Hmm.
The second component or imperative is that they have to be predictable. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes managers will reschedule the staff meeting. Something important has come up. A fire's burning, need to go put it out, right? And these meetings get rescheduled. In this environment, you cannot do that, because people now are not interacting with their colleagues or their manager on a regular basis. So they're counting on these meetings happening when they are scheduled to happen. So if you're going to set up these meetings, don't reschedule them.
Okay.
The third component is they have to be interactive. These meetings cannot be just the manager providing an update of information, and that's the end of the meeting. They have to be very much interactive because we need employees to be feeling just as though they were still in the office. And the last part of these meetings I'm suggesting to people is the front end of these meetings need to be dedicated to some social interaction. So how was the weekend? How are you doing with all of this? How's the dog? How's the kids? All of those kind of things that you would normally do in a business, in the work environment. Try to replicate those as best you can within the office, or within the office, rather.
And that actually just leads perfectly into the next question. Obviously, some people refer to their office mates as their work family. And so now, what is the potential impact of that social isolation that you just referenced from our friends in the office? And other than just making, the first part of the meeting about that social interaction, what else can we do to sort of avoid potential for that social isolation?
Well, the big concern that organizations need to have with regard to that social isolation, particularly if it goes on for the long term, is that your employees are going to they could become disengaged in the business.
Hmm.
They're not feeling part of the team anymore. They're feeling not so much that they're outcast, but they're losing that communication. They're losing that other reasons why they're actually at work, because they enjoy, as you've just referenced it feels like a family. We're spending a lot of our time with our friends and colleagues, and now we're losing that. So the potential concern of people being isolated and not feeling part of the team is that they could move on and leave that organization. So potentially you're going to have a larger turnover rate of
Yeah.
employees because we've left them out there to be isolated, not intentionally, but what do we do about making sure that they don't feel isolated? And there's a couple of things that I would, again, suggest that managers should be doing. One is doing a regular check-in. It's maybe, and it's not necessarily about the meetings that I just mentioned. It's about calling the employee up and just saying, how are you doing?
Yeah.
How are things going, right? And the manager has to, what I call, be intently engaged and using their active listening skills. Because if they don't, then the employee is going to feel that you're just making this call because you feel like you have to make this call. We have to communicate through our communications with the employee that we do care. It is important for us that they're doing okay. Second component is, how do you establish what I would call etiquette expectations for the different types of technology that we're going to use to communicate back and forth? So what's appropriate to email you versus text you versus using Skype versus having a video conference? Remember now that, as I said earlier, sometimes we can get answers just by walking down the hall, knocking on somebody's door and saying, hey, what about this? That, and if we, and what's appropriate now that I can't do that? Do I send you an email? Do I send you a text? And what's the expectation for the turnaround for the response to that? So the team needs to establish those guidelines, and they need to follow through with them. And the next thing that I would do, that I'm encouraging employers to do, is to have what I would call a virtual lunch or a virtual coffee break. Have that do it by Zoom, some sort of a video conferencing platform that you can use. Order pizza for the people, if you can do that, that deliver it to their home, and sit down with everybody and basically have, a lunch together. Whether you do that every other week but make it such that you're not losing that social interaction with people. And even if it's a coffee break, encourage employees to do that. If you had coffee with the person next to you, well, encourage them to continue to do that and use a video platform to do it, right? That way, people are not feeling isolated, that we're replicating the environment in the office as best we possibly can, given the circumstances that we're working with.
It's great advice. All right, Kelly, we've reached our last question. What is the number one piece of advice that you are giving your coaching clients right now?
The number one piece of advice that I'm advising clients right now is it's all about cash flow. It's managing their cash,
Mhm.
making sure that they're looking at their accounts receivables and ensuring that that we're collecting money that is due. Um, it's critically important that we have some sort of an idea in terms of what our cash flow is looking like on a going forward basis. So I'm encouraging them to develop basically a 13-week cash flow projection, being able to understand, do we have enough cash that's going to be able to sustain us through that period? And if it isn't, what steps are we needing to take in order to be able to get there? Are there more funds that are available to us that we haven't collected on? Can we reduce discretionary spending even further? Are we making sure that we're paying our bills when our bills are due, as opposed to paying them early if we need the cash flow to do that? So I think in this day and age, or what we're going through, Eugene, the important thing is that people manage their cash, because that is going to be the thing that is going to get organizations through this and get through to the other side.
As we know, cash is king.
Cash is king. No
So
more important than now.
that's right. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your insights and thoughts. If you'd like to learn more about Kelly, please check out Business Coach Kelly, KELLY.com. If you'd like to learn more about Align, as I mentioned, please check out aligntoday.com. And we hope you will join us next time. Till then, thank you so much, and I hope you make it a great day.
Thanks, Eugene.